Welcome to the Making Kids Count podcast, brought to you by Kentucky Youth Advocates, where we sit down with policymakers, community leaders, and youth to discuss ideas to make Kentucky the best place to be young. Welcome to the Making Kids Count podcast. I'm Shannon Moody with Kentucky Youth Advocates. I'm our Chief Policy and Strategy Officer here. And we are recording this podcast on day 42 of the 60-day session, which means it is definitely crunch time to get bills moving this legislative session. So just as a reminder, please check out KYA's bill tracker to stay up to speed on blueprint priority bills and other bills that are good for kids. And we're really excited about who we have joining us today for this conversation. Today, I'm joined by three leaders in the child abuse prevention arena to discuss several issues before the General Assembly that make strides in keeping kids safe. Today, I'm joined by Jane Herms, President and CEO of Family Nurturing Center in Northern Kentucky, Sonja Grey, the Executive Director of ICKY here in Louisville, and Laura Wills-Coppelman, a fierce advocate for ending educator misconduct and child sexual abuse, who released Letter to My Hometown detailing her story. So, we all know that child abuse is 100% preventable. We also know that childhood sexual abuse is particularly difficult to identify at times and can be even harder to prevent. But all of our guests here today are taking an active role in doing just that. So Jane, Sonja, and Laura, will you please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what your organization or coalition is focused on when it comes to kids' safety, and maybe what the top 2 to 3 areas of that focus is for you?
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Jane Herms with the Family Nurturing Center. We're in Northern Kentucky, and we are a nonprofit dedicated to ending the cycle of child abuse. Every year, we serve 10,000 people through a range of free education, prevention, and treatment services. And our work really falls in 3 buckets. First is prevention and education for both adults and children. We educate adults on how to create safe environments for children, how to protect them, recognizing the signs and symptoms of abuse. We educate kids directly in order to empower them to be able to understand the signs of abuse and how to report. We also provide supports for caregivers and parents so that they can create healthy relationships and the strong foundations that kids need. And then finally, we provide therapy and trauma-focused healing for kids who have experienced abuse.
Well, thank you. And to all the viewers, thank you for tuning in. My name is Sonja Grey, and I am the Executive Director for ICKY, which is Exploited Children's Help Organization. And our history of how we started as an organization is really due to victimization of a child. 1983, there was a tragic incident with a little girl who went riding her bike over by Bashford Manor Mall. And unfortunately, the only thing that was left was her little red bike. And her name was Ann Gottlieb. And that is really how we evolved as an organization here in Louisville, Kentucky. Our mission is to prevent and reduce the incident and impact of child abuse by providing education, advocacy, and support services to the children and families of Metro Louisville. So when I say that, I always, ask people, what does that mean? Because we all have mission statements. And really what our true mission is to reduce the victimization to any child. And so our priority is to first deliver evidence-based child abuse prevention education to children pre-K through 12th grade. We are looked at here in our city as the leader of providing this type of child abuse education to kids. We are the only nonprofit that partners with public and private schools, and we go into the classroom and we talk to kids about body safety and digital safety. And as we know that it is the adult's responsibility to make sure that kids are safe, we too, just like Jane, we provide child abuse prevention education for adults to be able to recognize, react, and report child abuse. So those are really our main focuses, is really about education. Our first priority is to educate children, and then the second priority is to educate adults and create those safe spaces and create those opportunities for some safe, healthy conversation and communication as well.
Thank you so much. I feel very honored to be here today. My name is Laura Wills-Coppelman. I am a founder of ICKY Schools, which stands for Institutional Complicity Kentucky. It was an effort that grew out of lived experience, and I'm fairly new to the nonprofit and policy world. The work has evolved organically. We have been diving right into exploring legislative pathways to make a difference and to improve outcomes for students moving forward. So at the core, our work is really focused on three areas. First and foremost, prevention and awareness. And so for us, the focus is mostly around grooming behavior, as it often precedes sexual abuse. And so understanding what those behaviors look like and allowing for intervention to occur before harm is irreversible. Second, it's about addressing the systems that allow misconduct to be hidden. And then third, it would be about strengthening policy and accountability so that these schools that are supposed to be fortresses of protection for our children can be a safe space for them. And good faith adults will also be protected with those clearer guardrails.
So it's really great to have all of you with different perspectives and levels of wisdom and experience here today. We know that direct training and education are incredibly important in the ways that we can protect kids from sexual abuse and sex trafficking, especially. And you all have also gotten involved on the policy side of change. So I know all of you have kind of a different entree or introduction to policy work, but Sonja, can you talk a little bit about what got you involved in policy?
This job. No, honestly, coming in as an executive director and with this mission, along with as part of our mission statement was advocacy. And one of the things that I want to say is that you do not have to be trained in policy to be an advocate. So I'm one of those people, if you have a voice about, what can be right for children, then you want to sit in that space. And so when I came into this role, first it was all the internal systems, and then also being able to connect with community partners such as Kentucky Youth Advocates. And they had an arm, a cohort of policy. And I was very interested in that because, again, that's not my background at all. But I knew that policy is what is going to help change systems. And when you're on the ground level of looking at things, even current laws that may need to be updated or new laws because we're seeing trends that are happening within the community or within the school, you want a place where you can, definitely share your voice in that. And so Kentucky Youth Advocates, the policy group, was just that place for me. For whatever reason, I tend to find the gaps in some of our systems. And this was a great way for me to be able to share what I was seeing, on the ground level with a group of individuals, and then looking at what type of laws or what type of policies do we have in place or not in place that we need to really look at, again, to safeguard children. So really my first work into policy work was joining with Kentucky Youth Advocates and being as the executive director of ECHO.
And ECHO is a fantastic partner in the Face It movement to end child abuse as well, that's supported by CoSave for Kids. So we're really grateful for that partnership and people being included in that. Laura, you jumped into policy a little bit differently, and that was kind of where you started. Can you talk a little bit about what that has looked like for you?
Yes, this was not on my 2026 bingo card. It was something, as I said before, that unfolded organically. It was about survivors using their voices, and it was a beautiful domino effect that started to happen. And what I'm seeing is that when one voice speaks, another will certainly follow, and then another. And what a beautiful sound that is. So first and foremost, just so excited and grateful for the awareness that culturally, I think how we've evolved to be even willing to engage in these conversations. So that's been a really exciting way for me to channel this energy now into advocacy for policy change. So of course, first it started by having something happen to me and wondering how in the world could something like this happen in a system designed to protect children. So then asking questions, researching, trying to find, as Sonja mentioned before, the gaps in the system that could have even allowed this to unfold. And then when you start speaking publicly, something really interesting happens. Other voices speak up, and then you start sharing your stories together, and patterns emerge. And so that was the point at which I realized that policy, and what led me into policy space, it's ultimately the core, it's the foundation of how we can address these issues at the root of the problem. So I called my first legislator and had no idea what I was doing, and made my first appointment, and I've been up there several times since then. So now I'm just trusting the energy and the momentum, and I'm very excited and hopeful about this legislative session.
Laura jumped in and is navigating it so impressively, and we're grateful for your all's advocacy with the other women who have been through similar experiences. So, Jane, you co-chair the Face It Policy team, and will you talk a little bit about what got you first interested, and then now you're helping to really set the stage for some of the policy work that we do with the Coast for Kids Face It movement?
Sure. I think policy and advocacy work really is a natural extension to what we're doing. If you work daily with people who have been impacted by abuse, then staying silent really isn't an option. And so, as much as the work that we do with individual kids and families is important and essential, it's not enough. And so, I think that we know that to really see large scale change, then we have to impact systems and policies. And, that comes through advocacy and looking at people who have the power and ability to change those large scale systems. Ending the cycle of child abuse takes all of us, no matter how great your organization individually is, it's not enough. And so being able to look at where those gaps are and come together as a community to protect kids is really important. Like Sonja, I really got involved through Kentucky Youth Advocates and through the Face It movement, and looking at those bigger policies, some of which, were on my radar and some weren't. So, great shout out to the staff at KYA who really have their fingers on the pulse of what's happening for kids and look at best practice, not just here in Kentucky, but across the country to see what we should be doing, and just really leaning in and trying to figure out how to support that.
Well, as you mentioned, Jane, it takes all of us, and it's so critical for voices from all over the Commonwealth to be involved, and to have people who are interested in stepping in, maybe to an uncomfortable role at times, but stepping in and having tough conversations with legislators or elected officials. So both of you had mentioned the Coast for Kids Face It movement policy team, Sonja and Jane, and I know Laura, you've recently been involved and included in that. We have been talking about a ton of bills that have been filed related to child sexual abuse prevention, child safety. There have been just a lot of bills introduced this year around child sexual abuse prevention, prosecution, accountability, and including in professionals in either the education space or other child serving settings. So we have seen bills related to, as Laura mentioned, grooming and criminalized grooming activity from House Bill 4 with Representative Proctor. We've seen a bill that has been filed now, I think, for the fourth session in a row from Representative James Tipton around addressing educator sexual misconduct and involving school district and staff and students in mandating appropriate disclosures, non-disclosure agreements, things of that nature. We've also seen a bill from Representative TJ Roberts, House Bill 608, which would disallow the use of non-disclosure agreements that involve child sexual abuse and child sexual assault. There's also Senate Bill 196 from Senator Aaron Reed, which would disallow employees in public schools and private schools from having sexual relationships with students for a certain amount of time. House Bill 154 would remove the statute of limitations for civil actions arising from child sexual assault or abuse. So we have seen, and that doesn't even include all of them that we have seen filed this session. Those are just kind of an array of what we've seen. Laura, I'd like for you to get us kicked off with this question, and then Jane and Sonja, please jump in. But why do you think we are seeing such a focus by our legislators on the issue of child sexual abuse prevention over the last couple of years?
I think there's a few reasons. I think there's more public awareness, first and foremost. And I think if we're speaking about current day, we're seeing similar themes and conversations and exploration happen on a macro level and a micro level within our own communities. So I think when it's just happening on a macro level, it's easy to say, oh, well, this isn't happening in my own backyard. That's happening over there. But it's harder to deny when we are, it seems to be inundated lately with one story after another of educator misconduct, sexual misconduct toward minors. And so first and foremost, the public awareness. And I also think that understanding the importance of early intervention, because in my mind, if we wait until a child has already been harmed, we've already failed them, if that's the standard for which we intervene. So I'm so excited about House Bill 4. We would be one of 13 states to have this legislation. It is, I've called it this many times. I feel so strongly. It is truly a threshold moment for this state to set a very strong example. And it would empower good faith adults. In my mind, this is a bill of empowerment. It's a bill that empowers good faith adults to intervene early. I often talk about that icky feeling that you get when you see something that doesn't sit well. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, not only through my own experience, but talking to survivors, how many people will say, oh, I had a bad feeling. I wish I would have said something. So it's also about trusting those instincts. So I think overall, it's about awareness and a willingness to engage in this conversation. And I really think the Me Too movement was the biggest kickoff to this several years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree with Laura. Increased public awareness. Also, with that public awareness has been the increase of technology. So we are able to share, information and our stories with one another and put it more on a macro or a micro level. I really give a lot of shout out to Kentucky. And again, for all Kentucky listeners, please understand that we're talking about everyday people. We're not saying that you have to be a professional, with child abuse prevention education, because each and every one of us have the ability to keep a child safe. And so really when I started seeing the momentum was last year, with this extortion bill that, became law. I was like, okay, so Kentucky, we're starting to pick up that momentum that, we really have some powerhouses within Frankfurt, throughout the state of Kentucky that is really saying, hey, look, not here in our state, not here in our city or in our community. And so with that, I think that, again, you have the four of us here, we're in, our legislators' ears and saying, look, this is what we're seeing. This is what we're needing. This is what other states have to protect their children. And who doesn't want to protect a child? So I think that with the public awareness, has increased, but also with the use of technology and being able to share that information and having those collective shared stories. So it's not just coming from Laura and within her territory, but no, we're seeing this across, our state. And again, I hope that our listeners will understand that, we are here to protect your children. We're here to protect all children of Kentucky. So the things that we're putting forward is in every effort to make sure that children, first off, can embrace their own childhood without being abused, without having the trauma of abuse, but being able to grow up and be really healthy adults that, soon will be part of our society as well.
Yeah, and I would echo all of those things. I think survivor stories have brought, so much awareness, but also research, has really evolved. And when you know better, you do better. So I think we see now that protecting kids isn't just a moral issue. It is a moral issue, and that should be enough. But also, it's really a public health issue. And there's real data and research that talks about how entire communities are impacted when we don't do our best for kids. So many of these bills are really just common sense, but unless they're codified, they're not enforceable. So to see us taking these steps is just a great thing for Kentucky kids and families.
Yeah, I definitely hear some threads there too around the stories of individuals who are willing to step in and vulnerably share what has occurred to them. We don't As Laura said, it kind of opens a door, right? Like once one person starts to speak about it, then we start hearing all of these other stories, especially in areas where there's a systemic issue happening. And then, yeah, access to technology, not just for sharing, but also for, unfortunately, utilizing technology to exploit kids as the other side of that coin. And while there's a lot of good that comes out of technology, there's also a lot of risk and potential harm as well. Um, Thinking about where we see child abuse and specifically child sexual abuse and grooming occurring, we do know that there are kind of hotbeds for it because it's where kids are and where kids spend a lot of time. So, by and large, school staff are those who protect kids, make them feel safe. School staff are advocates, teachers, family resource youth service center coordinators, school counselors. They are the ones who are making sure that our kids are safe in school every day. And unfortunately, we do have some bad actors in those environments, whether it's at school or other child serving organizations that can take advantage of having frequent access to individual kids. We've seen dozens of media stories about school staff being fired or criminally charged or convicted of sexually abusing students in districts across Kentucky. And it's not just in Kentucky, but we certainly see our share of it. What have you all been seeing or hearing, like as it relates to what role schools play in creating safe spaces and also holding people accountable? What are you all hearing when it relates to this topic?
And
And
I
Jane,
think,
yeah.
sure. Unfortunately, abuse does happen by people that kids know and trust overwhelmingly. And so, as much as it's much easier to talk about stranger danger and much more comfortable, we know that 90% of the time abuse happens by individuals that the child knows and trusts, by people that the family knows and trusts. And so, being able to, so that's not really new information for us, but I think we've gotten to understand the grooming patterns in so much more detail and understand that abuse doesn't usually start with violence. It's not usually a surprise. It really does happen over weeks and months and sometimes years of systematic grooming and trust building so that people are above reproach. And when you think about that stranger danger, it's easy to warn kids. But it's really hard for us as adults, as parents, as supervisors, as neighbors, to think about the people that we know and trust as potentially harming kids. And so the more that we can talk about it, the more that we can understand the grooming behaviors and recognize those patterns and empower kids to be able to talk to a safe, trusted adult and know that it's okay and create an environment where kids are believed, then I think the better off they will be.
And my whole take on everything is that, we built laws for adults to follow, but I think that there is something to say about investing into preventative programs. You heard me earlier say that our first priority is to educate children and youth, to be able to recognize the signs of what abuse is, both in personal space and in digital spaces. We have we no longer use or share with kids to find a trusted adult. Again, for smaller kids, trust can be very hard for them to define, but we utilize for kids to find safe adults. Kids will know when they feel safe or unsafe in situations or with certain individuals. And so a lot of that for us at ECHO is that we want to educate and empower the kids of knowing what the signs are so that they'll know when they feel safe or unsafe, and then how to identify who their safe adult is and to be able to speak up and speak out and with no blame or no shame. So within the school systems, we are also educating, the student body population or even youth serving organizations. And, just like what Jane stated, we know that wherever kids are, that is where perpetrators want to be. So even with outside of the school institutions, we're finding within gaming apps and gaming consoles and things of that nature, even YouTube Kids. I talk a lot to adults about, even these places where you think that is a safe space place for kids, understand that we still have to do our due diligence, and the responsibility is to make sure that we're monitoring that activity or any conversation or communication as well. One statistic that I do want to throw out there from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is saying online enticement rose nearly to 520,000, roughly 80% higher than 2024. So we know that technology is moving a lot faster than our laws can. So again, as to why, investing into prevention programs. So organizations like Jane and my own, we are constantly providing that educational component while laws are catching up to make sure that anyone that is trying to entice or hurt our children will be reprimanded, by law. But until then, we want to make sure that kids are educated just as well as adults.
I love hearing you say that, Sonja, about educating kids, because it really is such an important piece of the puzzle. And one thing that I think is really important to understand about grooming specifically is that the way an adult would perceive grooming behavior is very different than the way a child experiences it, right? And so that's all the more reason I feel it's extremely important for us to educate our children about what grooming looks like. First and foremost, because it's not a single action in isolation. It is a pattern of behavior. And also to kids, it feels really good at first, right? You feel seen, you feel special, you feel important. And so it's very destabilizing for a child, especially if it crosses that threshold into irreversible harm, to even make sense of what happened or how it happened. So I love that, Sonja. That piece of the equation is so incredibly important. The other thing that I have noticed that I think we should continue to push our legislators about and to question our school districts about is the tendency to keep all investigations into these situations internal. When you consider that, there will be an inherent conflict of interest. That is a possibility. And so I am really advocating for third-party investigations into any of these situations because it just eliminates that possibility as well. The guardrails are clear on both sides. And I also want to say, because I think sometimes when this legislation comes across, it could, to some educators, make them feel targeted unfairly, right? Because I think we can all agree the vast majority of educators they care deeply about kids and they're wonderful. And they're expected to be so many things, educators, but also sometimes first responders, sometimes counselors. The list goes on and on. So when you consider that now we're talking about more training and more policy changes, I can understand it can feel overwhelming. So I think also acknowledging that piece of it as well, showing our educators that this is not an attack. If anything, this is a way for us to protect them as well, and to have those safeguards in place so they can do their jobs and they don't have to worry about anything being misunderstood in the first place.
Laura, I really appreciate you saying that because we want to make sure that those teachers and other school administrators and folks who work in school systems feel cared for, they feel supported and not targeted. And we also know that kids are in schools 7-8 hours a day, and that is where unfortunately some of this happens, and balancing that can be really difficult, and making people feel supported and also addressing and tackling these really tough issues. So just from this group of well-educated advocates that we have here, I would love to know just what's one thing that you want listeners to take away from this conversation. What can individuals do to take action? What would you recommend folks take action on? Jane, would you like to start?
Sure. I would just say that safe children, safe communities don't happen by accident. It takes intentional work. It takes everyone being engaged. It takes policies, it takes practice, and it takes resources. And every single person can impact that, no matter what your role is, and no matter what your job is. If you're a neighbor, if you're a mom, if you're a friend, an aunt, everybody can help to end the cycle of child abuse. Everybody can help to keep kids safe and to figure out what that way is for you, whether it's actually taking a training or just speaking out or supporting a child that looks like they could use some help. There are ways that all of us can help every single day.
Yeah, Jane, thank you so much for taking all those wonderful answers.
Sorry, Bunny.
Even in the midst of trauma, there has to be some lightheartedness here. But we really want to convey that child abuse is 100% preventable. And the way that we are able to prevent that is all the things that Jane mentioned, creating those safe environments, having conversations with kids about how to identify what abuse is, but again, how to identify who their safe adults are. And then most importantly, when our kids disclose, there's no blame and no shame to them. Having those open conversations is really, really going to be valuable. Like I said, with the increased enticement from technology and from apps and things of that nature, we as adults, we need to be more open to what kids can bring to us without overreacting and being able to kind of take that information and build those safety plans. Again, I love what Laura said, that icky feeling. We talk to kids about that icky feeling. We all have that. If there is an icky feeling that you see that is something that just doesn't quite register, doesn't quite look right, I know in Kentucky we're a mandated reporting state, so make the report. You do not have to be the investigator. All you have to do is be a concerned citizen of seeing something that icky doesn't look right and make that report. And then, the other thing is support prevention education, support nonprofits that are doing this work. Our boots are on the ground providing this type of education. And so, being able to provide time, talent, or treasure, to any of our organizations, I'm sure is going to be very welcoming.
Yes, I agree with everything everyone has said. Protecting kids is something that every member of the community plays a role in, plays a part of. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway. And as someone who is flying by the seat of her pants in the legislative world, one thing I'd also like to encourage the everyday person to do if they care deeply about this issue, and I know there's a lot of people out there who do, contact your legislators, write an email, pay attention to the school board meetings, go to the school board meetings, ask questions, educate yourself even more about grooming behaviors and what those signs and patterns look like. That's the key. That's the key to protecting our children. And essentially, what drives me is not about rehashing the past. It's about saying, okay, how can we take what we've learned from all of these horrible experiences that have happened to children, and how can we take those things, learn from them, and do better for our kids now? And so the biggest takeaway is that everybody can be empowered to play a role in that change.
Well, I know what we heard today was there's opportunities for everyone to play a role in keeping kids safe, and you don't have to be trained, you don't have to be an expert to check in on kids or to help share information or educate or provide your time or treasure to organizations that do this work, or to call your legislator and let them know that you're supportive of what they're working on. There's a lot of opportunities. Technology will continue to present opportunities and challenges in this space as well. And we can also look for ways to invest in prevention so that our kids have the tools that they need. And in addition to that, our adults have the tools that they need in order to really address the issue at hand. I would also like to just say thank you to our legislators who have been filing these bills and really pushing the opportunities that we see in Frankfurt around prevention and education and accountability. That is an incredible support for folks who are in this space, and especially for the kids who are being directly impacted by it. I would also like to thank Jane and Laura and Sonja for joining us today and for all that you do in support of Kentucky's kids and keeping them safe. I would highly recommend folks visit kyouth.org to learn more about Blueprint and Face It policies, find advocacy tips and tools, and access the bill tracker to look at what is happening as we get closer and closer to the end of session here. And as always, thanks for tuning in to the Making Kids Count podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Making Kids Count podcast. For more information and to listen to more episodes, visit kyouth.org/podcast. To support this podcast and our mission as the independent voice for Kentucky kids, please consider making a gift at kyouth.org/donate.